Hi, I'm Paul Elam, founder and publisher of A Voice for Men. Over the last couple of years, the long overdue backlash against corrupt feminism has finally begun to happen in earnest. The new media and even elements of the old mainstream are starting to echo the same concerns we have been addressing for 6 years. Our former shouting into the wilderness is now finding an audience that previously wouldn't listen. We are also seeing new voices rise against the ideological corruption. In the course of all this proliferation, questions arise. How far should anyone go in opposing the hateful ideas, lies, and corruption of modern feminism? At what point do we cross a line into just being another problem? Part of that depends on your motivation. If your goal is ad revenue through clickbait and pleasing an audience that sees all this as entertainment, or if you are just one of the entertained, you will have limits based largely on mainstream sensibilities. On the other hand, if you see this as a cultural war, as a battle to stop the very real abuses of men and boys, you might have different standards. AVFM is undoubtedly in the latter of those two camps, a position that draws flack, often from the people otherwise on the same team. We are indeed controversial, and our message and actions, while not near as extreme as characterized by some, have been sometimes geared to shock, offend, expose, and even punish some very bad actors. We're not alone in this approach. Recently, we've seen non-MHRAs march into the heart of a radical feminist event, challenging and even mocking their ideas. Another popular vlogger retaliated against a feminist bully who tried to have him fired. By taking her personal information that she placed online and broadcasting it to a much larger audience, he assured that retribution would be exacted. The comments on his YouTube channel reflected a fair number of his supporters who took issue with his actions. People were worried about sinking to the level of the opposition, of becoming the monster we're trying to fight. They are legitimate concerns that should be examined. Rather than do so through the subjective lens of personal morality, it may be more helpful to take a look at the history of social change. A bird's-eye view of that historical record reveals stories written in blood, sweat, and tears. From the women's suffrage movement to the long-running struggle for American civil rights and gay rights, anger and violence were a part of the process. The suffragettes firebombed buildings and plotted other crimes. In the 1960s, we saw the great American race riots where African-American neighborhoods burned. Contrary to public opinion, the gay rights movement was born not as a magnanimous gift from feminist activists, but as riots in the streets of New York City where gay men reacted to constant police harassment and brutality by fighting back. Indeed, we would be hard-pressed to look at any point in human history where significant social change was not preceded by fighting back in the truest of sense. Bigotry digs deep into human consciousness, and it does not let go because of a civil debate. That brings us now to the emergent social psychodrama, the men's human rights movement. Now, MHRAs and those who sympathize are charged with asserting men's innate value as human beings in a world that wants no part of it. We are forced to contend with the familiar moral atrophy and aggressive ignorance that will not respond to reason or be guided by human compassion. We are confronted with the same disheartening political indifference and social hostility so familiar to other movements. And we face internal divisions on how far we should go to make our case and to call attention to the injustices we try to ameliorate. History, again, helps us gain some perspective. The men's movement was not born on the internet. It did not emerge as a backlash against the advent of gender feminism of the late 1960s. It is not an extension of modern fathers' rights initiatives. It is a movement 100 years in the making and failing to gain momentum until now. The men's movement has always tried to further itself on reason and logic depending on the moral decency of the average person. That is why it has a 100-year history of failure. The fallacy that merit alone assures acceptance was precisely what took the movement nowhere. As other movements for human rights demonstrate, people do not care unless apathy is made uncomfortable. Unreasonable people do not yield to reason. They yield only to some kind of force. That leaves us with a question of how far we will go. For each person, that will be different. Some will settle for challenging feminists academically, expressing measured reactions to their moral depravity. It is a needed approach that unfortunately yields nothing on its own. Others, like AVFM, will take it further, aggressively calling out the agents of hate, seeking any legal way possible to attach suffering to their actions. We act with calculated provocation and often do so to the dismay of people who might otherwise support our work. We have achieved a good measure of success in forcing a different perspective on men into the cultural narrative. We will continue to do so because for AVFM, this is not about claiming an impotent patch of allegedly higher ground. It isn't just clickbait for blogs and YouTube channels, and it isn't just a reaction to feminists seeking to interfere with our leisure activities like gaming. It is about thousands of men driven from their families and forced from higher education on the power of false allegation alone. It is about countless ruined lives, ignored by more timid social commentators. It is about men like Earl Silverman, Chris Mackney, and countless others whose deaths matter to so few. When dealing with genuine agents of hate, our methods are the moral high ground. They are the only moral high ground available. We are not engaged in this struggle to make ourselves feel superior. We are engaged because people are dying and lives are being ruined. There are few limits on what we will do to put a stop to it. When it comes to violence, our message is simple and clear. Just be thankful we won't resort to it.